Hello, everyone. It's Saturday, about lunchtime. Excited to be on today. I hope everybody had fun at AAOP. Looked like an amazing lineup. Some really cool stuff out there. Saw a couple of your posts. Thank you so much for sharing. Shout out to Linda for sharing some of the stuff that kind of was in her top. Uh, I guess it was three or five or what have you. That was very cool. And shout out to all the people that created new products to put out there, put stuff out on the tables. I love it when I see people putting themselves out there and trying to figure out what is next, what is going to be great for patient outcomes. And I think that is interesting. So today I was going to put, I was really inspired by a few people to put together uh, a thought around what would I do if I was telling myself what I would invest in to move into the O&P space. And I think some of my answers may surprise you, but I hope that it inspires you. And obviously, your answers don't have to be the same as mine. We have a lot of time doing this for a long period of time, and I'm starting to see into the future as well, the potential of new materials, new systems, stuff that's going out. We've had the opportunity to move and see things that have essentially disappeared or gone off the deep end. And you see some of that stuff coming, but then you also see new technology coming down the pike too. So I really hope that this will help you. So these are my top five things that I think are worth investing in if you're looking at getting into digital for O&P. So I'm going to get my big head out of the way, and here we go. And if you have any questions or what have you, just let me know, and we will answer them live if I see that. Oh, Mike wanted to drop by and say, General, thank you. Hey, Mike. Well, guess what? You're going to be put in this show just a little bit. So let me put this up here. Love that Mike's going up to AMUG, representing not only FI, but the dyes designs and, of course, the material stuff that he does. So, but before I go in too far into that side of things, your first thing is to not go out and buy a printer. So, Mike, I apologize, but my first suggestion to you is do not go and buy a printer. So, in fact, you should invest in yourself. So, this is 100%. Donald, sorry. Hey, O&P stands for orthotics and prosthetics. So, um, yeah, thanks for being on. Don't leave just because I said orthotics and prosthetics, but there you go. So O&P is orthotics prosthetics. So the number one thing, if you have a budget for anything, I would put aside money to invest in yourself, and that looks different in a myriad of ways, but there are people out there that have online courses. You can go in person, and I would highly suggest seeing what goes into creating these devices and learning how to build things before you learn how to print things. So invest in yourself. If I had $5,000, I would probably spend it all to invest in myself, and then I would save another pocket of money and then use that to make it go. So, number one, 100% invest in yourself. Two is invest in relationships. Why relationships? It's because that is going to be your lifeline to other technologies, techniques, and such. So, for example, for myself, I've invested a lot in relationships, not only with people with contract manufacturers, OEMs, material companies. Those people also invest back into the things that I love to do. So, one of the main things that I love to do is to be able to provide prostheses in the developing world. And a lot of these companies will help me get there. But two is invest in the relationships, genuinely relationships, one relationships that are two-way and not just taking. And there's a lot of people in the field of orthotics and prosthetics that want or encourage that collaboration. And so that would be my encouragement to you, is a two-way relationship of, hey, we're giving you information, we're sharing information, and we're growing together, because that's really what we need. Number three, I think is going to be no surprise to many people, is you have to have a software. And that software, I don't believe, should be free. And can you get by with free software? Sure. But you really need something that is an end-to-end solution. So this idea of, hey, I'm going to use this software to convert into this software, and then this software to convert into here, and then this software to do this, and hope it all goes together, I don't think is the way to go. That's my hot take, and I will die on that sword. And I believe Freeform is the gateway to be able to create every single product you want in the orthotic and prosthetic space. So, invest in a software that you can grow with, and that's going to be the key. Now, next is invest in scanning. Oh, and by the way, we are a Freeform reseller, so Advanced 3D. Hi, Abdallah. Thanks for joining us from Saudi. We are a Freeform reseller, and we also do training with Freeform and that sort of thing. And one day I will share my story on how Freeform found me. Number four is a scanner. You've got to invest in a scanner. So there's a couple ways to go. Not everybody has $20,000 laying around to buy a scanner, which is the Arttech Eva. I totally get that, totally understand. But if you are looking for a scanner that literally does everything, scans inside of the cast, scans outside of the cast, scans people, scans for reverse engineering, there is not a better, more utility scanner out there than the Arttech Eva. Every other scanner that is sub $20,000, you give up something. And as long as you know what you're giving up, that is okay. So with the Arttech Eva, you don't give up anything. It can literally do everything. It is our go-to thing. So, but let's talk about scanners for a little bit. If you are not scanning yet and you're looking for a way to scan and you don't have $20,000 hanging around, I would start with the Comb Scan. Start with the scanner that's in your pocket. And the Comb Scan is a subscription service. It's a yearly service, inexpensive, sub 1,000, I think sub $800, like in the 750 range, what have you. Great customer service, great scanning, and it's a way to get started. Now, that scanner, it's a way to get started. It's a tool in your toolbox. It is not going to compete with the results that you get from an Arttech Eva. It just isn't. It's not supposed to. It can't. But it gets you started, and that is the key. So invest in yourself, invest in relationships, invest in Freeform, invest in an Arttech Eva, good scanner. And then number five, probably also controversial, but I've actually changed my mind. So on the top 5, I do believe that you should have a 3D printer so you can practice what you have designed. Now, what 3D printer do you get? I think one of the Bamboo Labs printer is the right answer. And here's why: it just works. You stick filament in, your product comes out. There's no fiddling. You don't have to upgrade the hot end and the extruder and the firmware and all that. It just works. I'm done with the building of the printers and swapping out the hot ends and figuring out which combination. I just want something that works and that I can print with, and the Bamboo Lab does that. Now, you give up something. It's a small build volume, so you're going to be limited to pediatrics, small things, upper extremity. Still a great printer for that sort of thing. Now, Mike was on a little bit earlier and he said something about going to AMUG. And Mike is with a company called Filament Innovations. Filament Innovations specializes in high flow 3D printing and has a printer called the Icarus that is specifically for the O&P industry. It's a beautiful printer. You print something very fast. You can print a test socket in vase mode in an hour or under. And then with some other hot ends, you can actually print some higher resolution stuff, but you're still keeping your sockets, say sub 5 hours, maybe sub 3 hours. It's a great option, but you're going to pay for that. So an Icarus, I don't know exactly what the price is. I think you're in the 35,000 and up range. And so the reality is that is the reason why I didn't put that in my top 5 list is there are people that have those machines that have capacity. And so that's why you invest in the number 2. You have a relationship with somebody that has an Icarus and you say, "Hey, when you have some free time, do you mind putting my files on your printer?" And then you build up your time on the printer. You make sure that it's what you want. You learn it. You have somebody that's an expert in using it. You can actually probably get as good or better throughput in that than if you were just to bring that in right away. So use the excess capacity. Now, a lot of you know that we do a lot of things at Advanced 3D with powder bed fusion style printing. These are printers that we did not buy brand new. We bought them used. And we are little people. We don't have venture capital. Our money is real live money. So if it's not going into the business, if it's going into the business, it's also getting taken out of our family budget, the 3 of us. So that means, cars, houses, that sort of thing. Those are decisions that we make as business partners on whether we're going to invest that money into the business or pull it out into invest in ourselves. And so that's a whole different ballgame. And you can find these machines on the secondary market. But the same thing goes back to, and I'm going to just take this back up to the relationships. What you want to do is find some people that have the machines or technology that you want to use. Many times it's going to be less expensive for you to put stuff on their machine than you to have it in house. Is it awesome to have it in house? 100%. But here's the thing is 3D is moving so fast right now. The powder bed fusion playground is going to look very different, probably even the end of this year, knowing what I know, than it has the last 5+ years where some of these other big OEMs have dominated. You've got some lower end, I say lower end, um, that's not the right wording, but you've got a company like Formlabs that's coming in doing SLS, Centratech, the XYZ stuff, now Nexa, more budget SLS, open platform stuff that is very, very interesting. But you give something up. You give up the build volume, so you're not able to do big things, which brings you back to the relationships with having somebody that has a bigger machine where you can grow together. So that is my top five. Invest in yourself. First thing, relationships, Freeform, an Art Tech Eva, and a Bamboo Lab. That is so important to get you going. Now, after all that, guess what? You are looking at time, how to get your time back and return it to yourself so you can do other things. And so that's when you start looking at automation. So this is when you start looking at things like Spenties for your AFO and wrist hand orthoses and other things. The second is, look at something like Proteer that has some interesting iPad type of things that would go and do some of your prosthetic modifications. Maybe invest in some of the stuff that we have coming down the pike of some automation of specific devices. Those are all things that you do after all this. These, to me, are a foundational thing. But here's the cool thing: a lot of these apps, they either have a pay per use or pay to play, or instead of, say, month-long contracts. So those are all discussions that you have, which goes back to the relationship side of things. So the biggest thing is find somebody that you want to work with, work together, collaborate, make it a two-way relationship, and that's where things are going to grow. Just remember, these big companies, OEMs, their leadership changes frequently. So the person that you know most likely will go to another big OEM. It's literally every 1 year, 2 years, and so the reality is those relationships are so important at a core level. So like almost like application engineers, the people that are going to be there forever, or the companies that are actually doing this in the O&P space. So, had a question from Donald. Um, let's come back here. Make myself a little bit bigger. He said, "What SLA machine would you recommend?" And well, SLA is not really great for the O&P field right now, or any of the resin-based stuff. It's just not strong enough, and that's just the way it is. So, would it be great for maybe some upper extremity or casting or something like that? But um, this is where if I had something come up, I would have a relationship with somebody that had an SLA machine and say, "Hey, I need to have this done," and that's what I would do. I would not invest in an SLA machine, probably ever. So, but that's just, it's just one man's opinion on this. But I'd be kind of curious to know why you asked. So, Donald, if you want to leave that in the comment, that would be pretty amazing. Let's see if there's any other questions out there. So I know I harped on the scanning side and the software side, and there's a lot of great options. Well, there's a lot of options if you want to play in the freeware side of things, but you give up something. You give up your time. And I'll leave you with this. Over the last 6 years, I learned a specific program and spent a lot of money doing that. And the reality is, while that was good education for me on workflow and such, I kind of wish I would have been spending that time learning how to create some of these workflows and such for myself. And I think that's another important thing is why, if there are potential for doing things in another way without a software, that's what I would try to do. And that's another reason why I firmly believe in Octane Freeform is it gives you the complete freedom to control your own intellectual property, and there is automation built in. And that's what it comes down to, is how do you create um, value by productizing your intellectual property, and that's through automation. So people that have an amazing prosthesis or orthosis or something, the reason why it doesn't scale well is really because they cannot put it into words. And if you can't put it into words, you cannot automate it. But what does it mean when you can't put it into words? It means that you're a poor communicator. And I'm one of those people. But what we've done is we've hired somebody that does an amazing job of asking the right questions. And that person has taken what has started coming out of my brain, which has forced me into a way to communicate. And um, that is so important, is if you learn how to communicate, you're going to get the results that you want. Hey, Abdullah, great information. Wish we can have access to the recording. Oh, it'll still be on um, LinkedIn, so no worries on that. Donald, here we go. I asked the question due to better surface finish of SLA. I've also used SLA and reverse engineer approve. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing to remember with SLA, yes, beautiful resolution and such, but the reality is we don't need that for the O&P field. We're plus or minus a half a millimeter or more. We're okay with FDM and layer lines and that sort of thing. So we're extruding 2.5 millimeter nozzles, 3 millimeter nozzles on the FDM side, and the patient has an interface called a gel liner that is involved. So there's no real need to have a super fine finish unless there's something specific for upper extremity prostheses. And the thing to remember about SLA is there are some strong materials, but not great for cyclical stuff. So one thing is, many people walk 1 to 2 million or 3 million steps a year, and so that equates to 1 million to 1.5 million steps on a prosthetic side. And the reality is, none of the SLA materials can hold up to that kind of cyclical loading and um, torque throughout some of those areas. So that's one of the cool things. But I love SLA for like lost wax stuff, molds, some very fine parts for um, upper extremity. So molds for that, it would be great. So yeah, so Don, the gel aligner is the interface between the patient and the prosthesis. So very great question. So it goes the patient's leg, then they put this gel liner that's usually 3 to 6 millimeters thick that has some fabric on the outside a lot of times, and then they will put the prosthesis on. So really great question. None of this 3D printed stuff, unless specifically looking at, really interacts directly with the skin. So great question. Let's see. Good questions. Let's keep on trucking. We still got a few people here, and I'll stick it out for as long as people want to stay on. I love that we had somebody listen from Saudi. Another thing, great information coming from. Oh, that's a great question, Donald. Before I answer that, so I also host a podcast called the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast. So if you want to know more about the prosthetic and orthotic field, uh, it, it's a really great option. We've recorded 84 episodes. We actually are in the middle of recording our new season, which will take us up to 96 episodes. So our 100th episode is really right around the corner, and I've got a surprise guest for that episode, and I'm really excited about that. So Don asked, how is the liner joined to the prosthesis? So I'm going to go online and see if I can find a picture for you, done, and so we can just kind of talk through it. So there's a couple different ways that a prosthesis is joined to a patient, and so we're going to take a look at that. All right, I'm going to take a look at these images and see if we can. All right, so I'm going to take this here and make myself smaller again. So here is how a prosthesis is put on, and this from Coyote Design is my favorite locking mechanism, and they have a bunch of different items. But so the patient has a liner, and then there's a pin that looks like this, and that patient then that is at the end of the liner. Let's see if, oops, let's see if we can get actually there. Here we go. So, so this is an interesting. So let's come back here. Let's see if we can kind of pull this back here a little bit further. We're going to come forward. All right, so this is a liner, and that liner connects via a pin. So that pin looks like this over here, and then that pin goes into this locking mechanism down here. So one of the interesting things about the prosthetic from the Coyote stuff is it's airtight, so you actually get a little bit of suction. So that is really cool, which is another way that sockets are held on is via suction. So there's no pin, but then we create a seal with a sleeve that goes over the socket to seal off on a patient's limb. And so then it ends up having negative pressure in the socket itself. It's super cool thing. But let's keep on watching this and see what else they have in here. So this is what I talk about with the suction. So they are able to keep their prosthesis on really well because they have not only the pin but also the suction from the socket itself. There's this part, so different couple different ways to fabricate via molding. So anyway, great question, Don. Thanks for asking that. Anybody else have anything? I hope that was helpful. We still have a few people on watching. So anyway, that was a longer than top five that I was expecting. So I hope you enjoyed that. And hey, have a great weekend. Take care.